You already know something is off. You catch yourself replaying the same anxious thought for the fourth time today, and you wonder, why does my brain keep going there? Why does the negative feel magnetic while anything good seems to slip away the moment it arrives? Here's what's actually happening. Your brain isn't broken. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do: scan for threats, flag problems, prepare for the worst. That mechanism kept your ancestors alive. But it wasn't built for the world you're living in now, where the threats are deadlines, social comparisons, and a phone that never stops buzzing. And so your mind stays locked in a mode it can never fully switch off. What you'll get from the next 15 minutes or so are 5 specific, nameable techniques to rewire how your brain defaults to thinking. Not toxic positivity, not just be grateful, but actual mental tools grounded in how the brain processes experience. Each one has a name, so you can remember it, use it, and come back to it. Let's get into it. The first technique is called the reframe ramp. Most people, when they notice a negative thought, try to fight it. They tell themselves to stop thinking that way, or they slap a forced positive thought on top of it. That doesn't work. The brain doesn't respond well to suppression. Research out of Harvard shows that actively trying not to think about something tends to make you think about it more. It's the white bear problem. Tell yourself not to picture a white bear, and the white bear is all you can see. The reframe ramp works differently. Instead of replacing the thought, you build a ramp from where the thought is to somewhere more useful. You use the phrase "and" at the same time. So instead of "everything is falling apart" becoming "everything is fine," which your brain immediately rejects, it becomes "I'm really overwhelmed right now, and at the same time I've handled hard things before." That phrase does something important. It doesn't erase the difficult feeling. It adds to it. And the brain can accept an addition much more easily than a contradiction. I use this personally on days when my inner critic is loudest, not to silence it, but to widen the frame around it. Try this the next time a negative thought loops. Don't replace it, extend it. This is hard, and at the same time, and here's the thing about the next technique, it sounds almost too simple until you understand what's actually happening in the brain when you do it. The second technique is called evidence hunting. Here's the pattern many people fall into. When something goes wrong, the brain immediately begins building a case. It pulls in every piece of supporting evidence it can find: past failures, similar situations, worst-case projections. By the time you've been anxious for 5 minutes, your brain has assembled a very convincing argument for why things are bad and why they will stay bad. The problem isn't that the brain looks for evidence. The problem is that it only searches one direction. Evidence hunting is the deliberate practice of instructing your brain to also search in the other direction, not to find fake silver linings, but to find real, concrete data points that contradict the negative narrative. What's one thing in the last week that actually went okay? What's one skill you used that worked? What's one moment where the worst-case prediction didn't come true? Neuroscientists studying cognitive restructuring have found that when you actively generate counter-evidence, you create new associative pathways. The brain literally has to build a new route to reach a different conclusion. Over time, that route becomes easier to travel. The starter action here is simple. Keep a running list, even just in your phone's notes, of small evidence against your worst beliefs about yourself. Not affirmations, evidence. Real moments, real data. I was nervous before that conversation and I still handled it. I was behind on that project and I still finished it. That list becomes your countercase file, and the brain, which loves evidence, will start using it. The next technique builds on this, but it lives in your body, not just your thoughts. The third technique is called the body vote. Most approaches to positive thinking treat the mind as separate from the body. You work on the thought, and the feeling is supposed to follow, but that sequence is backwards about half the time. The neuroscientist Antonio Damasio spent decades researching how the body and brain communicate, and one of the clearest findings from that work is that emotional states aren't just generated in the mind. They're partially generated through physical sensations that the brain then interprets. Your posture, your breathing, your facial expression, these don't just reflect how you feel. They actually feed information back into the brain that shapes how you feel. The body vote is the practice of using physical state changes to cast a vote for the emotional state you want to move toward. Not to fake happiness, but to create the physical conditions that make a different mental state accessible. Concretely, when you notice you're spiraling into negative thought patterns, change one physical thing. Sit up straighter. Take 3 slower breaths, not because breathing is magic, but because controlled breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which physically counters the stress response. Or stand up and move for 60 seconds. Or change rooms. I started doing this on days when I sit at a desk too long and notice my thinking getting darker and more stuck. Changing my physical position doesn't solve anything, but it shifts the brain out of the groove it's been running in, and that small shift is often enough to make a more constructive thought possible. The body gets a vote. Let it vote for you. Now, the 4th technique is the one I think most people have never tried, and it might be the most powerful one on this list. The 4th technique is called the distanced observer. When we're inside a negative thought, we're very close to it. It fills the whole frame. One of the most consistent findings in psychology research over the last 2 decades is that psychological distance, putting mental space between yourself and the experience, significantly reduces emotional intensity and improves reasoning. The technique is straightforward. When you're caught in a negative spiral, refer to yourself by your own name and in the 3rd person. So instead of thinking, "I'm so anxious about this, I don't know what to do," you think, or even say quietly to yourself, "Your name is feeling anxious about this. What does your name actually need right now?" It sounds strange. It works remarkably well. Psychologist Ethan Kross has studied this extensively, and his research shows that 3rd-person self-talk helps people process difficult emotions more clearly, give themselves better advice, and regulate distress more effectively, because it activates the same mental stance we naturally take when we're helping a friend. We're usually far wiser and kinder when advising someone else than when advising ourselves. The distanced observer takes that wisdom and turns it back on you. It creates just enough separation between you and the thought to let you think about it instead of being trapped inside it. The phrase to start with, "Your name," "What's really true here?" and "What would you tell a friend who was thinking this?" One more. And this last one changes how the rest of the day feels, not just the moment you're in. The 5th technique is called directional attention. This one addresses one of the most overlooked drivers of chronic negative thinking, not the content of our thoughts, but where our attention habitually points. Attention is a resource, and like all resources, where it goes shapes what grows. Most of us never consciously decide what to pay attention to. We let the loudest signal in the environment, the most alarming news, the most painful feeling, the most critical internal voice, win our attention by default. And because we pay it attention, it gets stronger. Directional attention is the practice of intentionally assigning some portion of your attention each day to something that counters the negative default. This isn't avoidance, it's rebalancing. The idea comes from what positive psychologists call a broaden and build framework. Positive emotional states, when genuinely engaged with, broaden our thinking and build psychological resources over time. Practically, this means identifying one thing each day that genuinely gets your attention in a constructive direction. Not something you're supposed to appreciate. Something that actually pulls at your curiosity, your creativity, your care. A problem you find interesting. A conversation you're looking forward to. A skill you're developing. A place you want to go. Write it down in the morning. One sentence. Today, I'm directing some attention toward a tsai. That single act of intentional assignment starts to train the brain to look outward and forward rather than inward and backward. Over time, directional attention doesn't just change individual moments. It starts to change the baseline. So here's what these 5 techniques have in common. The reframe ramp, evidence hunting, the body vote, the distanced observer, directional attention. None of them ask you to pretend things are fine when they're not. None of them require you to suppress what you actually feel. They all work with how the brain actually functions. Its need for evidence, its responsiveness to physical state, its capacity for perspective, its tendency to become what it repeatedly attends to. The habit of negative thinking isn't a character flaw. For most people, it's a pattern that made sense once, maybe in an environment that was genuinely unpredictable, genuinely threatening, genuinely hard. The brain learned to stay vigilant. It was trying to protect you. What these tools offer is a way to thank the brain for that instinct and then gently, consistently redirect it. Not because positivity is a performance, But because you deserve access to your own capacity for clear, grounded, forward-moving thought, if one of these 5 resonated more than the others, I'd genuinely love to know which one and why. Leave it in the comments. That kind of self-awareness is already the first step